I would like to call the regular council meeting of May 25th to order. And first item is the approval of the agenda. Councillor Spruill, Councillor Sullivan, all in favor? Carried. Adoption of the minutes. Councillor Kettler, Councillor Spruill, all in favor? Carried. Next, we have delegations. Recommend that council receive the presentation from David Frisch, Chair, and Angela Holmes, Vice Chair, Regional Transportation Select Committee regarding Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, respecting regional transportation planning and advocacy activities delivered through the Comox Valley Regional District. Councillor Spruill and Councillor Sullivan, all in favor? Thank you.
Is that my cue?
Yes, Councillor Frisch, welcome to Cumberland, and look forward to your presentation.
Yeah, well, thanks very much for having us today, guys. Of course, I'm Dave Frisch. I think actually most of you know me, counselor for Courtenay and director at the CVRD. And last term, I was appointed to chair the Integrated Regional Transportation Select Committee. We also have with us here today Angela Holmes, and she's my vice chair on the committee. She has a long history with active transportation in the Valley, and she did a lot of work actually with the school district with her Safe Routes work. So she's a bit of an expert in the Valley on alternate transportation. And we also have Alana Mullally, who is the Senior Manager of Sustainability and the Regional Growth Strategy Planning. And she is an undergraduate in Peterborough and has her master's in land use planning from Kingston, Ontario. And the reason I mention that is because there's no better place to learn about urban planning than in Southern Ontario. Lots of lessons to be learned there. I'm sure she'll agree. So our purpose here today is to introduce you to the idea of working together on active transportation, to explain the vision of the Regional Transportation Memorandum of Understanding, and to request feedback on that MOU from you guys, and ultimately to seek your support and participation in the process laid out in that MOU. So before we get started, let me give you some background on how we've sort of arrived at this place. If we could just skip to the next slide there, or am I in control of that? Sure, and actually I'll just pass this over to Angela, who will go through some of these points for us. She's been around long enough that she remembers all of this. And do we have Angela? Maybe her, let me see here.
There we go. Okay.
There you go.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Nice to see some familiar faces there. Yeah, as Dave mentioned, I have been evolving in my role with active transportation here in the Valley through all of the steps and committees that you see on the screen. So originally we started with the Comox Valley Cycling Task Force, which was chaired by Rona Ray Leonard. And really it was a community movement. It was a way to tie our community together. And I just want to acknowledge Mayor Baird as well as Councillor Kettler for their varied roles in the path that leads us to today. So it's great to be back here presenting to you again. The Comox Valley Cycling Task Force was a committee made up of elected officials from all the municipalities, including the councillors, the mayors, SG71 senior staff, Comox Valley Cycling Coalition, which was a newly formed group at that time. And we're talking back in 2011, 2012. Then there was also VHA represented, the RCMP, fire departments, MODI, and Active Comox Valley were some of those original groups. Great work was accomplished, and it's a great example of community collaboration that happened here in the Valley. Some of the examples of that work would have been, we had a guest speaker, Jill Penrose, the 8 to 80 movement, and he's been really making some great statements in the world today around our COVID and how that's impacting active transportation. We had partnered with the newly formed Cycling Coalition. We partnered in Earth Day, Go Smart Days in downtown Courtenay. There was efforts to get bike lights out to the homeless, a campaign around that. Bike to Work Week, great coordination and celebration stations across the valley. And also there was successful grants to fund a coordinator of that group, as well as to fund a pilot project, which was the school travel planning project, which is when I came on to that committee. And that pilot project funded a 20-hour-a-week coordinator position, which eventually evolved into a 3-year permanent position hosted by the school district. So it was off to a great start. And then as the psychology in the Valley evolved around transportation, we realized that we really need to go beyond cycling. And that's where the task force then rolled into what we coined the Go Smart Committee, which was the beginnings of the Integrated Transportation Advisory Committee. So that committee was, again, had super support from all the municipalities at a staff level, as well as a government level. There was a terms of reference, the draft that was created in April 2015, and we had all municipalities sign on to that terms of reference. However, there was a real desire to make this committee sustainable and have it staffed and hosted in a place where we can make it sustainable. So we felt that as a committee that the best place would be through this regional district. And then the committee evolved again, and it has now, as it's known today, as the Integrated Regional Transportation Select Committee. And it was established with the mission to really consider collaborating again on matters that relate to regional transportation projects, including
Oh, I think I've lost her there. Angela, can anyone else hear Angela?
No, she went out.
point of contact for transportation.
That's okay. I can jump in for a minute if she comes back. Well, she can jump back in. But in essence, the IRTSC Select Committee had 2 specific mandates, and one of them was to work together with all the communities involved and create some sort of multimodal transportation along the Dyke Road. It had been identified as a crucial link in our communities with a lot of traffic and a good place where alternative transportation could be used to help within transportation. The second piece on our plate was actually trying to find out, like Angela was saying, how we can make a sustainable way to work together to tackle projects like that, or educational programs, or valley-wide planning. And so we were tasked with coming up with some sort of point of contact structure. And in the end, what kind of rolled out of it was this memorandum of understanding that would help us work together on transportation. The board of the regional district identified that the Comox Valley Regional Growth Strategy was a good place to host this because it embodied all the critical pieces that we thought were important in active transportation. And specifically, when we look at the regional growth strategy, we see that it focuses on making a sustainable community for us. That means that we can live and work and do all the other wonderful things that we enjoy doing here without basically ruining the valley and being tied to a car and doing it in a way that we can afford to do it in the long run. So we're not necessarily expanding, bursting at the seams and paving over what we love about the place. So if you could move to the next slide for me. It takes us into the why. And so these are pretty common themes that I'm sure most of you are familiar with. With traffic congestion, it's been shown that just a small uptake in active transportation can alleviate a lot of congestion. And that's been called the nudge effect, or the tipping point for that matter. And what we're finding right now, especially in our busy seasons in the Valley, is that you just get a few more people coming to town for tourism or whatnot, and all of a sudden our whole transportation system starts to clog up. And so the first 95% are sustainable, and then 5% more and the whole thing falls apart. So we think it's really important to offer that alternative transportation. We think there are a lot of cost implications to that as well. The infrastructure that we use to allow us to travel around by single occupancy vehicles is obviously very expensive. You guys know that as well as anyone. Furthermore, the community health, it goes without saying that people who are active in their daily lives, and it doesn't have to be through transportation, but it's a great venue, just tend to do better. They tend to feel better. It costs less on our health system. And I think mentally, people actually perform better in their daily lives, including at work. Recreation and tourism, I mean, you see that in Cumberland, the amount of people that are up there for tourism, to take in your trails and just to experience the culture you have in your downtown. And a lot of people now are coming to town and they don't want to drive around everywhere. They want to park their car. Maybe they don't even show up with a car, and they want to travel around town and be more connected to the community that they're exploring. For safety, I have this problem all the time where I get onto the road, and now that I'm getting older, I feel a little more vulnerable in my older age, and I imagine people who aren't accustomed to riding feel that a lot. So we think about our kids going to school, we think about people riding to work, and we know for a fact that there are a lot of people in Cumberland that actually work in Courtenay, and we know that there are probably a huge number of people from Courtenay and Comox that travel up to Cumberland to take in your culture and your trails. And so it's really important that we provide them with a safe way to get there. I imagine that Cumberland is contemplating how to deal with traffic as you guys grow, not just as a community where people live, but we're a community where people from the rest of the Valley come to enjoy what you have there. And finally, on the subject of equity, it's been shown that poverty can be reduced if you take out that transportation piece as a huge expense. So on average, it costs about $6,000 a year to run a private automobile. And when you look at the cost of a bus pass or the cost of walking to work or riding a bike, it tends to save a lot of money and be the relief that people need if they're in that economic situation. So for Cumberland, you also have your community school, and your kids are taught to walk and cycle to school all through their youth, and then they're sent off to a high school, and yet there's no real safe connectivity there. So it's something that this MOU might help to tackle. Can we get the next slide, and I'll pass it over to Alana Mulally, and she can talk a little more about the Regional Transportation MOU.
Hey, thanks, Director Frisch. The MOU that's been presented to you is intended to serve as a framework to promote that interregional cooperation. It's intended to do something that we're already getting better at doing, but that is to put our collective energy into advancing active transportation planning in the immediate term, but in the longer term, potentially a regional transportation strategy. So the MOU that's in front of you is based on 4 key principles. Primarily, or I guess the first principle is the principle of local autonomy. So this MOU, it's important to know that this MOU does not commit any of the proposed parties to any specific actions. It doesn't commit you to providing funding. Rather, it's an expression that you're willing to work together as part of a region on regional transportation issues. The second principle on which the MOU is based is holistic, or the principle of holism, I guess, essentially recognizing that in order to achieve a complete system, a complete transportation system, working together is our best way to achieve and support the development of an efficient transportation system to foster both the movement of goods and people. The third principle is that the MOU is based on ideas of healthy living and sustainability. So one of the examples that's provided later in the presentation is a prioritization of active transportation. So active transportation being defined as any kind of human-powered transportation, whether it's a bicycle, a mobility scooter, or other small electric motor type vehicles. And then the fourth principle is that idea of coordinated planning and cooperation in order to essentially put all of our eggs together in one basket and work together to see plans turned into actions. As Director Frisch noted, the IRTSC identified the Regional Growth Strategy Service as the key service that could be used by the parties to provide a vehicle to both plan for and take action on regional transportation issues. So as you'll know, the Regional Growth Strategy Service is a service that all 4 local governments presently participate in and commit tax requisition to. And through that, we're able to develop and present to the board an annual budget and work plan with devoted staff resources. So this MOU contemplates that we would use that framework, including the staff resources that are housed at the CBRD, to shepherd this project. The MOU talks about 4 key services that would be, or action areas that the staff could take on and advance to the decision-making bodies. One would be data collection and monitoring. As you might know, right now, we each individually collect a lot of data, and we don't necessarily have a way to easily share it and make sort of coordinated policy decisions based on it. The second role or function that this work could take would be in respect to advocacy. It would give elected officials the opportunity to be advocates to senior level government on regional priorities around transportation. Thirdly, the MOU could foster work on multimodal transportation planning. So as you might know, the Regional Growth Strategy contemplates that we will develop a regional multimodal transportation plan, and then each individually in our own jurisdiction start to implement some of the actions that plan could identify. And then fourthly, the MOU identifies public education and promotion, say for example, promotion of specific events like Bike to Work Week, that we would work together as a region to take on some of that public education and promotion of events. Rachel, would you please put through the next slide? So the slide in front of you now shows a potential process. So for example, if we were to identify an action or an initiative that a local government wanted to pursue, we could run it through these steps. So for example, either an elected official or perhaps at the staff level, a project is identified relating to active transportation, for example. That organization could then pitch a program or project through a technical advisory committee. You might remember that the Technical Advisory Committee is an existing body. It comprises the planning representatives from the 4 jurisdictions. So Ken Rogers is Cumberland's rep on that Technical Advisory Committee, but it certainly could be expanded to have subject matter experts. So that Technical Advisory Committee would then review a proposal, and then CBRD staff would prepare a report to the board to talk about how a specific initiative met some of the regional transportation objectives and essentially seek board direction on next steps, which would include, of course, referral to relevant jurisdictions. And then through this framework, if, for example, you had a project that involves, say, Area C, Electoral Area C and Cumberland, perhaps there would be an agreement struck between the CBRD and the Village of Cumberland to take implementation steps and funding, for example. Next slide, please, Rachel. So we have a couple of things in the hopper right now in addition to the MOU. One is a project that is currently funded through the RGS approved financial plan for 2020, and that's a gap analysis specifically on our regional active transportation network. So this is parks managers and planning staff so far through that technical advisory committee have started to scope what a gap analysis could look like for regional active transportation. In the bigger picture, we've made an application to BC Active Transportation to do a regional active transportation network plan. And I thank you very much for endorsing that regional application. Over the long term, certainly, I mentioned that the RGS contemplates a regional multimodal transportation plan. So that could be a long-term project that we could work on through this MOU and under the RGS service. Thank you. I think there is perhaps one more slide. No.
Yeah, it's just a conclusion, really. Of course, Councillor Brown is on our IRTSC, and Councillor Kettler definitely was there at the last term helping us out. So we hope that you guys will consider this MOU and have a good look over, see if there's anything that you need to add to it or any changes that need to be made, and reach out to us and talk to our staff at the RD about that. And at a future meeting, consider endorsing it. Do you guys have any questions?
Yes, members of council, do you have any questions? Nobody's. Councillor Kettler.
Yeah, just some comments. I think this committee is really important when we're looking at what's happening right now. You know, one of the focuses, of course, would be increasing public transit use, and we've seen a significant decrease in public transit use since COVID has hit, and almost a 70% decrease in revenues. We've put off our planning for our transit futures, and that's something you know that we're going to see a lot of change in this. You know, we're not alone in that. Many regions are dealing with the same thing, and there's an ask to the federal government to help support public transit. But I think there's an opportunity to really look at it and evaluate it and possibly do things differently. We also have, you know, as Councillor Frisch will be quite aware of, the bridge project coming up in Courtenay, which will cause all sort of traffic issues. So we really need to have a committee like this to be looking at what options there are out there. When I was living in Montreal over a decade ago, you know, they have you know, rental bike programs where they have stations all over the city, and you just, you know, flash your credit card, you pick up a bike, you take it to where you want to go. You don't have to, you know, worry about parking or anything like that. And you know, maybe we can look at doing that, but with electric bikes, or, you know, there's lots of different options, but I think now is a really good time to be talking about that and to be planning things differently. And another thing that's been happening in a lot of municipalities is they're closing down some of their streets to vehicle traffic. And I think mostly this is done to help boost economies and give pedestrians more space so that they can observe physical distancing. But you know that this also could have implications for you know, transit and other multimodal stuff. So I think it's a really important committee, and I hope that we can be a part of it.
Thanks for the support.
Okay, Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I'm excited to see this actually move into a service. There, I I think we only managed to have 2 meetings that I was able to attend. And I understand that part of the way the regional district works is if you have a service, things really start happening. But without a service, there's not a lot of action that gets to happen. So I think this is a great move forward. I guess my question is how, in your steps along the way, Alana, it shows the idea coming from somewhere, and would there be a mechanism for us to be feeding those ideas into that, into the TAC, and what would that process be?
Thank you, Councillor Brown. If I could use the active transportation grant as an example, please. So that arose really because of the grant opportunity. And so we identified that at CBRD planning, and we took that to the technical advisory committee and said, this is something that we would like to include some dollars for in the regional growth strategy budget, sort of a scaled down. But if we are able to get endorsement to do a regional application, we'd like to do something bigger. So something that would result, for example, in a network plan. And so that's how, that idea sort of came about. It was a staff person. There would be nothing that would stop certainly an elected official from approaching their TAC representative and saying, here's something that, or a council, this is something that we would like to have TAC address through this memorandum of understanding. I don't want to encourage, you to be working at odds with each other. So, if you came forward with a resolution, right? But I think this would give you the ability to essentially ask TAC to look at something, and then we would report back. That group was identified because we already exist. If we get into this, if you agree that we get into this and you feel that there's a better mechanism, then certainly that could be, something that the parties want to explore. But as an existing body that I think for all intents and purposes is functioning quite well, it seemed like a good place to start.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that, I think that the ability to work together is one of the key points here, in that when we're looking for those infrastructure dollars from other governments, it looks really good to be coming as one body. And this allows us to do that, whereas before we didn't really have a mechanism to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like Councillor Kettler alluded to, there may be a bunch of infrastructure money coming, so let's get ready for it.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation. You did a great job, and it's always good to look back because it reminds you of the things that you were involved in, but also how far this committee has actually moved forward, and the projects that they have undertaken. So thank you very much for your presentation, and you're aware that you will get a decision from council at the next council meeting. So
Thanks so much, guys.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot, you guys.
Okay, there's no unfinished business. Correspondence. Recommend the council receive the correspondence regarding the Comox Valley Economic Task Force in response to COVID-19. Councillor Brown, Councillor Sullivan, all in favor? Carried. You see before you the letter requesting for our participation. Is there any questions or concerns about this process? Yes, Councillor Brown?
I think this is great. A regional approach to recovery is a great idea, but I have a few suggestions. So in the outline that we received, there's not really a mention of the sort of opportunity of doing economic development differently as we come out of COVID and try and rebuild. And so it would be nice to see some reference to that, to having a lens of climate and social health in the parameters of this group. And so then, and there's also representatives list, a list of representatives to be included in the group. I'm not going to list them all, but I don't see, so I assume that Kaylin would be attending on our behalf. Is that correct?
We don't have that clarification. That was one of the questions I had, was who was representing us on the TAC committee.
Okay, so yeah, I would definitely recommend that Kaylin is there and that he bring our economic development strategy to that table and use that as a lens as well for moving forward. But I also see a gap in both the lists. The first one, the representatives from business development and partner organizations. I don't see, because we don't have a BA, we don't have like a small business representative there. So I think it would be great for us to find someone from our local business community to, or perhaps from the steering committee to attend as well. Just representing those smaller micro business and kind of entrepreneurship, because that's not really represented there outside of the chamber, which I'm sure they would do a good job. But it would be nice to have somebody from Cumberland representing that small scale business. And then in the other, in the bottom sector, the key industry sectors, I don't see service or hospitality there, so that seems weird. Maybe it was just a miss or something, or maybe it's included in one of the other sections. So those would be my suggestions. The only concern I have is that this, you know, it's again a regional approach, and Cumberland has a distinctly different economic situation and makeup of businesses than the rest of the Comox Valley, and I would just, so those changes are my suggestions to help make sure that the people that we represent are included there, the businesses we represent in the
Yes,
village.
Councillor Sullivan.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I really echo what Councillor Brown is saying. While I support this concept in principle, this basically just feels like rounding the same troops as the CBED troops. And we have decidedly got our own direction in that. So I'm just a little bit curious what this would entail that would be different than us taking on our own economic development situations.
Councillor Kettler.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, so this really is specifically response to COVID and an economic recovery plan. That's what the whole point of it. So it's like all hands on deck, everybody get together, figure out what we can do as a whole, as a valley, to help our businesses, to help stabilize things and hopefully grow our economy again. So it's not us getting back into an economic development service. It's specifically a response to COVID, and you know, everybody at the board table just wanted to put everything else aside and really just focus on that, and like I said, all hands on deck to deal with this response, because it's obviously it's going to be, you know, the worst economic crisis is shaping up to be in many generations. So it warrants that kind of response, and I think that's what we're trying to do here and trying to achieve and get recovery plans for the different sectors out of this. But this is just still, sorry, my dog's eating in the background. A conceptual at the conceptual stage. So there's lots to add to it. You know, you'll see in the report that we haven't come up with the terms of reference yet. So those still need to be developed. So there'll be lots of time for input, like Councillor Brown was talking about earlier. So yeah, this is still just an introduction. We're just trying to sort of figure out what the governance of responding to this crisis would look like and hopefully we can be part of that recovery.
Yeah, I echo all the same concerns as everyone else with it. But has there been a time frame? Is it is specific to a time frame that they want? I noticed that it said weekly meetings, and so that's quite a bit of work in a short amount of time. But was there any discussion on the time frame?
Yeah, so as far as like the elected officials go, you know, we're supposed to be more like the steering committee, and then there's, as it describes, a technical advisory committee. They would be doing most of the meat of the work. So they would probably be meeting more frequently than the steering committee. We would need to like help set direction, but they would probably have a different schedule than us, but none of that has been set out at this point.
Okay, Councillor Brown?
Yeah, so I was just thinking, well, Councillor Kettler was talking about how we could use this as a mechanism to further the Bevan land development should opportunities arrive out of this. And also, you know, I think the biggest need in terms of rebuilding or responding to the economic crisis that has come about through this is relocalizing our economy. And we've realized we've lost a lot of international markets, and that's been CVED's focus for a long time, and the through federal programs, et cetera. And so this is an excellent opportunity for us to relocalize those services and goods that we were shipping off and have them more available for locals, especially seafood I'm looking forward to. So yeah, I think there's an opportunity there for us.
I also think there's an opportunity for the rest of the valley to learn from us. So it works both ways. Yes, Councillor Kettler?
Yeah, just further to that, Mayor, you know, we were early signers on to social procurement, and the CBRD recently signed on as well. So, you know, further to what Councillor Brown is saying, I think there's an opportunity to really have a local movement and have social enterprise be part of what we do here, and you know, employing people, you know, with barriers, you know, shopping local, you know, really create that local economy again. And as you said, we already sort of have that within our policies. So yeah, I think there could be some really good opportunities.
Great. So would someone like to make a motion that we participate? And would it be recommended that we write a letter to them telling of some of our concerns, or should that be done at the meeting?
I think because both of us will be on the steering committee, that there's an opportunity to voice concern there. But if council wants to you know, come up with some resolutions or put forward ideas, I think that is welcome as well. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, Councillor Brown?
Yeah, so I can make the motion to for us to participate in the Economic Recovery Task Force response to COVID-19, and look forward to giving additional suggestions via the terms of reference or participants.
Okay, a seconder for that, Councillor Spruill. Okay, any further discussion? All in favor? Carried. Next, recommend that council receive the correspondence from Dr. Schaefer requesting letter of support regarding regulations for independent cannabis retailers. Councillor Sullivan, Councillor Brown. All in favor? Carried. Councillor Kettler?
Thank you. Yeah, I'll just speak to this. So cannabis retail had been deemed an essential service through the COVID crisis, but the regulations that regulate the industry prevent them from having online sales and from doing delivery, and that's something that other small businesses have been able to fall back on, and has saved a lot of small businesses to be able to do that during the crisis. But cannabis retail hasn't had that opportunity because of current regulations in BC. Other provinces have changed those regulations, so they're asking that that we put forward a letter to the province to ask that the regulations be changed similar to other provinces to allow for online purchase and delivery for cannabis retail.
Anyone else want to discuss? Yes, Councillor Sullivan?
Yeah, I just wanted to give my support to this letter. It was brought to us by a former colleague out in Fernie. And it just makes too much sense that they're asked. And I just wanted to put my support for it.
Councillor Brown?
Yeah, I'm happy to support it as well. There's a mechanism for determining age, and yeah, I don't see why it would be treated any differently than any of their other emergency or whatever they're called, you know, essential services.
Okay. Councillor Spruill? Your mic's on, your mute's on.
Yeah, I support this request. I think it's not an oversight, but it needs to be brought up to speed with the way other products of that nature are treated. And yeah, that's okay.
So we can all agree then. So would somebody like to make that motion? Go for it.
Okay.
Councillor Kettler. That we write a letter of support. You're not coming through, Jesse. I can't hear you.
Muted.
Here, I can move it. I'll move that that staff write a letter of support requesting supporting regarding regulations for independent cannabis retailers.
Seconder. Councillor Brown, all in favor? Carried. Reports. Recommend that council receive the Village Hall for June 1st, 2020 report. Councillor Spruill, Councillor Kettler, all in favor? Carried.
Thank you. Council has scheduled a Village Hall coming up this coming Monday, the next Monday on June 1st. And I should, for those that haven't attended a Village Hall meeting, I should note that these meetings are where residents can come and sit with members of council and have informal conversations about matters brought up by the residents. There's no agenda. It's a very informal setting. And so this upcoming meeting on June 1st, we're working on procedures to resume in-person meetings, but including committee meetings and public hearings, but those procedures haven't been finalized. And under the current cautionary situation that we're still in with COVID-19, we just don't feel that we're quite ready to resume in-person meetings. Village Hall meetings are valuable both to council members and the community, but staff is recommending that we cancel this one on June 1st and work towards making the October 5th one safe for everybody so we can continue moving forward.
Questions? Councillor Brown?
So I'm disappointed to lose this meeting. I think it's a really important time for us to be connecting with our community, and and I just don't want to lose that. I think there are a myriad of things we could be talking to people about right now, including economic recovery and how we've responded to COVID, among a million other things. So I am sad to see this come forward. I understand that the meeting in person is challenging, and I also believe that we are creative enough to come up with a solution for that. So I would love to see us move it later, maybe later into the summer, and not cancel it entirely. Do you think that's a possibility, Clayton?
Through your worship, yes, certainly something that we could look at. As the corporate officer was mentioning, what we're trying to do is we're just trying to finalize all the details relating to these in-person meetings. And we're still receiving some information on what that will look like. And so as soon as we're ready, we can certainly have that meeting, or the village hall meeting, as soon as we're ready. I would think that we'll probably have most of that information by the middle of June here, so that we could schedule something in the near future there. The one other option that we could look at, and I know some committees, and we haven't specifically looked at it, but we could bring back a little information. And this isn't exactly maybe what council may be looking for, but I know some communities are doing it via this sort of platform through the like either Zoom, and allowing that sort of forum to be able to do that. There's certainly other challenges relating to that once you open up a meeting. But what we could do is we could look at that and report back. We'd probably be able to get back to you in one of the next two meetings there about a new date, if that's what council wishes.
Thank
Councillor
you.
Kettler?
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Brown. I think it's pretty important to be able to get feedback from people right now. And this meeting was planned to be outside anyway, and I was, thinking about the Coal Creek area, and it could be set up in a way where physical distancing is still maintained. And I know that staff is working on setting up procedures for the cultural center and doing different things like that. But maybe we could just have this one outdoor one and observe physical distancing in an outdoor space. Because I do really think that it's important to be able to give that opportunity to people to give feedback again, because it's been quite a while since they've had that opportunity.
Councillor Sullivan?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I agree that we shouldn't be canceling this meeting, but I do have all the faith in the world in our staff. If they feel like they'd like to postpone this, which is one of the options, then I fully support that. And it just says to reschedule sometime in July. Maybe we could just do the first Monday in July or something not too far away. But if staff is wanting to postpone for now, I support that. But I would also support as soon as we kind of figure out more what's happening, the Waverly's opening, more things are opening, so stuff's opening up. And the fact that it is going to be held outside, I wouldn't think that, hopefully we wouldn't wait too long. But I'd be into postponing it, but not for very long.
Councillor Spruill?
Just a minute. Oh, I wasn't muted. Yeah, no, I agree. It would be disappointing to everybody not to be able to have this meeting. Yeah, I keep thinking if we're in the outdoors, surely there must be a way. I know it's a lot of chairs, but to spread chairs out in a part of the park, maybe the parking lot. I'm sure there's rules in place, and Rachel will probably set me straight on that from the government about whether that would pass or not, an outdoor meeting. I mean, anyway, I really don't want to miss this meeting. Either we put it off or see if there's any way. It's hard to know how many people would come, so if we had the outdoor meeting. So anyway, I'm more inclined to that.
Councillor Kettler?
Yeah, and just sort of spitballing, but people could bring their own chairs. There are benches there for people who aren't able to bring their own chairs, but then you could put out with advertising that people can bring their own lawn chairs, and so that they could be, we could put some chalk marks on the ground so that, each person could be spaced properly. So I know it is a little bit tedious and a lot more work for staff, but yeah, hopefully sometime in the summer we could have something like that.
Would it be feasible to do it in Village Park instead? I just find it's a little confining down at the there, and I think we'd have a lot more people and a lot more area to make the space available if we did it in Village Park.
So, Your Worship, so one of the things that, one of the reasons why this recommendation came forward the way it did was that we are still working through our WorkSafe plan, our safety plan. So we haven't actually finalized that. So I should have emphasized that earlier, that we really have to have that in place and make sure, and that's both for staff as well as council and the community safety. And so we're like every other organization, we're working through that. We are pretty confident that we'll have that in place in the coming week here. And so that first phase of it is that staff safety piece. And the next piece there is starting to look at meetings such as this. And so I would think that the July meeting date would be an option that would be able to be satisfied. The only other piece just to recognize is the phase that we're in is there is only a certain number of individuals that can gather. I know that, talking in the past there, that some of these meetings are not, maybe there's not 50 people, but we do have restrictions into gathering. And so we have to be very respectful of what those orders are. And I'm not sure those will change by July, but those are the type of things that we can, if we need a little more time, but we should be able to put that plan in place. If council wishes to be looking in July, we can look at that and start putting some plans in place for that. Just really at the end of the day, we need a little bit more time to be able to work through this safety plan so that we can do this right. And I like the idea. I think Councillor Kettler, I mean, those are the type of things such as bringing their own chairs, and we would have to make sure that communication is very clear that, at a certain number, if the number gets too large, well, basically we have to cancel it right there on the spot if that's the case. I mean, we don't know that situation, but we can have a stronger communication strategy for this if council wishes.
Okay.
Thank you. I think that's a wise decision. I agree that I looked at the alternatives and it said July and August, and I thought that would be really good to do that. The weather would be nicer. Sitting on the grass at that time when we don't have all this rain could be a possibility too. So yes, so somebody would like to make a motion that staff bring it back to the next council meeting, or is that too soon?
I was just going to move that we postpone the Village Hall meeting until July, and that staff can come back with the date specifically. Does that work?
That would work. And I think if we're saying July, that gives us a broad enough time that we'll be able to put some plans in place, and we'll report back if there's any issues. But I think that that's more than enough time to make sure that's done properly and safely.
Okay, Councillor Brown, you made the motion. Seconder? Councillor Kettler, all in favor? Carried. Next, recommend that council receive the Regional Organics Composting Project Participation Report. Councillor Sullivan, Councillor Kettler, all in favor? Carried. He's got his mic on mute.
Can you hear me
Thank
now?
you, Rob. Yes, I can hear you now.
I was just saying it's good to see everyone's faces and hear your voices. It's been a while. So the regional district is moving forward. Council's aware they're moving forward with the organics treatment project in Campbell River and the transfer station in the Cumberland landfill. And as part of advancing that project, the regional district is seeking commitments from the Comox Valley and City Campbell River municipalities that they'll continue to provide feedstock, so kitchen organics and yard waste, to their future facility that will be constructed early 2022. So this report's really, I mean, there are no other options to process kitchen organics, and this report's really just seeking council's direction for that commitment, and for the CAO to write a letter that will continue to support the program.
Any questions? Councillor Sproul? Your
You're
mute's
muted.
on.
Yeah, it's good to see where we're at this time with the regional organics composting, but quite shocking at the increase. I know we were a pilot project and we liked it being that way, but I see now our compost going a long, long way from us, creating large carbon deficits. The potential that the food compost could be commingled, that was always a fear, if you will, of mine, that it would be mixed with the sewage from Camel River. I think that idea is long gone, I hope.
Yeah,
So it will be kept pure and useful for food agriculture. Is that what we understand? Well, that's reassurance.
It'll be processed to a different standard than the biosolids waste material, correct?
Okay.
I just want to further add, though, it will be a high carbon footprint when we're looking at our carrot commitments. It mentions that the food composting is a plus for us, but that's only if we keep it locally. Once it starts traveling, it might be a negative. I don't know. Anyway, that's all I have to say.
Yeah, and I think all those numbers are to be worked out in the future. I mean, they will be backhauling with landfill material, with garbage material from North Island to the Cumberland landfill. So there'll be trips being used both ways with the trucks and trailers, but yeah.
Councillor Sullivan?
I was just going to say that I'm happy to see this continuing and that I'm really supportive of it. It's unfortunate that the price goes up, but everything does.
Councillor Kettler?
Yeah, just going to say that it was a pilot for a really long time. So it's nice to see that it's moving to the next stage, that Courtney will participate, that Campbell River will participate, and having the buy-in of all of these communities is really important to making it possible. So even though it is expensive, it would be even more so if we were trying to do this alone. So yeah, it just, the cost of waste management is high, and and as we know with our garbage pickup and all across the valley, that that's going up as well. But it's something we have to do. So.
Okay, Councillor Brown?
Yeah, I just want to say, finally, it's moving forward for the whole valley. It's awesome. And it's a great program. So happy to continue to feed it.
Yes, it's been a long process and we've kept asking, when is it going to, the rest are going to get on board, and finally it's happening. So that is really good. Councillor Sproul, you had a question?
So does that mean that restaurants will be included now with this new organics composting?
In the short term, the answer is no. So they really want to get the facility up and running, maximize the residential yard waste and kitchen compost. The plan is ultimately to expand it, though, to include commercial and multifamily, larger multifamily. And the reason behind that is it's part of their waste management plan that's been submitted with the province. I mean, they've committed to removing that waste stream from the landfill. So ultimately they'll get there. It's just going to take some time.
Yes, Councillor Brown?
Sorry, I just remembered something else, the interest on behalf of our community school to be included in this as well. And I don't suppose institutions are on board yet. And just knowing that, you know, the planned life of our current landfill is only 5 years. So the more of that product we can divert from our landfill, the longer that landfill will last and the less cost to everyone who uses it. So do you have any info on that, Rob, whether institutions would be joining at any time?
No, they'd be lumped with the commercial, we call them ICI, institutional, commercial and industrial. Again, it's a few years off before they look at that sector.
Okay, someone like to make the motion and read both of the motions, please, at the same time? One after the other.
Recommend that.
Yes, go ahead.
Recommend that the CAO write a letter to the CBRD committing to providing residential food and yard waste organics currently provided as part of the pilot project to the Regional Organics Compost Program.
Seconder, Councillor Kettler. All in favor? Carried. Oops. Yep. Okay, now the next one. Recommend that council direct staff to fund the cost of, recommend that council receive the water treatment plant and reservoir project update report. You're still on, Rob.
All right.
Councillor Brown and Councillor Sullivan, thank you. All in favor? Carried.
So the good news is we have power to the water treatment plant. We have resolved the statutory right-of-way issue. We've settled the agreement with the landowner, and that's behind us. The bad news is we've incurred some extra costs that we didn't really foresee when we started this project 2 or 3 years ago. And really, I mean, it's basically, you know, related to the delay of the project, additional requirements from BC Hydro, and then of course the statutory right-of-way costs, land costs, the legal costs, the appraisal costs, the legal survey costs, the list goes on. Hydro's been very challenging. You've probably heard me say this before. You know, we were required to widen the colliery right-of-way for access behind the townhouse complex. We were required to install a gate. We had to pay fabrication for a gate. Then they required us to hire an engineer and a power line company to assess our existing 3-phase lines that go up to the plant that have been in place for years. We had to have drawings done up. I mean, the list goes on. You know, unfortunately, we've amassed more than the original project budget, as I've kind of outlined in the report. We had about $72,000 in miscellaneous change orders, which, you know, was well covered under the $300,000 contingency. But the fact of the matter is, extending the 3-phase power costs a lot more than we first anticipated, and then all these other extra costs have gotten to the point where we're close to 200,000. We'll be close to 200,000 with including committed funds that still need to be expensed as we commission the plant. So staff was really seeking council's approval to, you know, source these cost overruns from long-term debt funds and the sewer and wastewater infrastructure asset replacement reserves as in the recommendations. And then we'll need to amend the budget, the current budget, the 2020-2024 budget moving forward. I'd be happy to answer any questions, try to provide some clarity.
Councillor Brown?
Yeah, I mean, I imagine I share your frustration, Rob, with the whole process with BC Hydro and the property owner, and I wonder if there's a mechanism for feedback to BC Hydro for these additional costs, not to try and recoup them. In my wildest dreams, that would be nice, but even to give feedback on how this unfolded and how it could have been done better.
So, so we have annual stakeholder meetings with BC Hydro. In the last 2 years, I've expressed extreme frustration with the whole hydro process. And so the different division managers, including the design manager, they were present and heard myself and the former CEO loud and clear. I don't know that there's a formal mechanism. The problem with hydro is I don't know who to talk to. I mean, I think, you know, we've spoken with the public relations fellow, what's his name, in Nanaimo there. I mean,
Ed.
they know we're frustrated, and it just, you know, going through 3 different design techs in the design process, switching each time and restarting the design process, dealing with 2 different design managers. It's just been so extremely frustrating. I can't even describe it. I mean, I've never been through a process like this before that's been this long drawn out and so many changes and added requirements, and the list goes on. So I don't know what to say other than I think they've heard us loud and clear to this point. I think they know we're frustrated, but I don't know if it does any good.
Yeah, I mean, we spent how many millions of dollars of provincial and federal dollars? That was before my time. Building a water treatment system, and then BC Hydro managed to effectively stall it for an enormous amount of time. I feel like there's got to be a way, but so maybe we'll just think about that, how we might do that.
Okay, anyone else? Yes, Councillor Kettler.
Yeah, just about the different funding streams we'll use for this. So on the bottom of page 33, the majority of the money you're saying will come from the water and sewer infrastructure asset replacement reserve. So 161,000 of that, and then it's saying that in 2019 the balance was 635,000. I'm just wondering about, you know, because we have the sewage lagoon upgrade happening, and would likely need all that money for that. Is that going to impact that project at all?
Maybe I can refer that question to Michelle if she's online.
Yeah, I can't.
Worship, we're just bringing Michelle, or the financial officer. There she is.
So that would still, what we did with when we were using our reserve policy to transfer balances over the optimum balance, we purposely transferred the surplus from the water stabilization reserve over to the infrastructure, knowing that we were going to be going over budget on this project. So we actually, you know, but you know, this is what the reserve's for, and so that's, you know, I think it's okay if you take the 635 and take out the 160. You know, you're still left with a pretty okay balance for any overages that you might need. You can also look at any possible overages, maybe not this year, but next year and the year after in the stabilization that's over the maximum for water and sewer, and just make sure that we keep transferring those overages to this reserve to cover anything that might go wrong.
Thank you.
Sorry,
We've
one more thing is that we also have extra borrowing for that sewer because we went for larger amount of borrowing before we knew we were going to get the grant. So we do have a bit of cushion for that type of funding as well, if anything goes wrong.
Okay. So would somebody like to make the motion?
I'll move that council direct staff to fund the cost overruns on the project from interest earnings, the remaining balance of the long-term debt, and funds from the sewer and water infrastructure asset replacement reserve totaling 197,000. Further recommend or move that council direct staff to bring forward an amendment to the adopted 2020-2024 financial plan bylaw to reflect this expenditure.
Councillor Brown, seconder. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much, Rob. I hope all your frustration's over. Next, recommend that council receive the Climate Action Revenue Incentive, CARP 2019 public report. Councillor Brown, Councillor Sullivan. All in favor? Carried.
Okay, so this comes to you every year around this time. At the last council meeting, council chose to purchase carbon offsets from the Synergy portfolio as their first priority. That was a possibility, so those were purchased. So the purpose of this report is to seek council approval for the Climate Action Revenue Incentive public report for 2019 for posting to the Cumberland website. So that is a report that's attached to my council report. And it outlines our plans and progress towards meeting our climate action goals for 2019. And so it goes through a variety of different staff members who put their feedback into the survey, it's kind of called, and then we produce a report that can go out to the public. So there is just two items in the attached survey that actually probably won't be on the website, and it's regarding the energy generating stuff that we do. And so the template that went out by the government earlier had those questions, but the survey that we fill in online and produce a report for the website doesn't have those questions. So just two items. Basically, we were in the planning stage of those types of items anyway, that we're looking into energy generation. And so there isn't a lot for that. And then the other thing we were able to do is, so in 2019, we, our emissions inventory totals 368 tons. Reduce that with our organics program by 125 tons. And so then we purchased 243 tons of carbon offsets. And again, that was from the Synergy portfolio, which is the Quadra Forest Conservation, the Great Bear Forest Conservation Project, and your Uganda Efficient Wood Stoves project. So our total offsets purchased came to $6,075. And so that's within this below the $7,500 budget that we estimated. And then we should receive $5,944 in carbon tax refund, which is greater than what we expected, which the 2019 or 2020 budget is $4,800. So yeah, and so just finally, I'm just looking for council approval on the public report for posting on the website. Thank you.
Councillor Sullivan.
Yeah, just a question on the CARIP. For the transportation actions, did your local government undertake any of the following for fleet upgrades? Did we purchase that electric car? Weren't we purchasing a car? Am I imagining that? I thought that was coming up for staff. Am I making that up?
Through the mayor, you're not making it up, but you're just a year
Okay.
early. So
I figured we'd know that for sure with big bow on it and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, that was it.
Not
I'm
yet.
ahead of myself. Okay, well, thanks, Michelle. That was it.
Okay, someone like to make the motion? Councillor Spruill.
Yeah, I recommend that council approve the Climate Action Revenue Incentive public report for 2019 for posting on the Village of Cumberland website.
Seconder. Councillor Kettler, all in favor? Carried. Next, recommend that council receive the COVID-19 response activities, May 11th to May 22nd report. Councillor Brown, Councillor Sutherland, all in favor? Carried.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. So the report in front of council just outlines a little, the latest update that we have in relation to the village's COVID activities. One of the things to mention, I think I've mentioned the report, same as the last few reports that have come forward. This is just based on last week's information. We've already seen some developments even in the last couple of days. So I'll just quickly highlight a couple of areas. And then if there are any questions, happy to answer some questions if council wishes to ask anything. So just to start out, since our last meeting, since the last meeting of council there, the province did announce a phase 2 restart program. And so there was a couple of key areas that were continued within that. And so we're working through that phase 2 restart program. So some of the activities that really are critical to our side, and we talked about this a little bit earlier tonight, is a safety plan. And so Work Safe, as long as the province has provided us some direction in relation to the creation of a safety plan. And so those sector safety plans, in our case, relate to areas such as the offices, recreation centers, playgrounds, parks. So there's a number of areas that are identified, and not all of them fall under, say, government services. Some of them are separated out individually. So staff this last week have been working both through the region collaboration groups, as well as specifically here about how we're going to be introducing these safety plans. And so the majority of the work lately has been looking at how we're going to implement, how we're going to roll these out, making sure that we have all the information that we need to. Most of the safety plans are really identified to make sure we reduce or eliminate any risk. And that could be everything from putting in any sort of, we call them barriers or engineered barriers. So that could be the construction of, you see them around from shields or barriers that you see at, say, any sort of office space where there's a reception area there. So there's an engineered barriers. Elimination of contact points we're working through that. Ensuring that gatherings or the number of people in spaces is at a minimum amount that we can conduct our business in a safe manner. So we're going through that right now. We're likely going to have from the staff side of things, in the sense of how we operate, that'll be in place later this week. We'll be taking it to our health and safety committee in the next, actually I believe it's on Thursday, and working through that process of that. WorkSafe and the province don't actually come and check on it, but if they did, we'll have, and there is a chance they could. We don't have to submit it, I guess is what I should be saying. It's not something we have to submit, but we have to have this document in place and available for them if they come and do any investigate or site inspection. So staff have been busy working through that. A couple of the other areas I'll just note as well is we should at the next meeting, we are working through a policy which we'll be presenting to council. And so that should be available for the next council meeting. And that just talks about what the recovery plan looks like in relation to the safety for both staff, the council, and the community in general. And so we'll be bringing that forward at the June meeting. We also are doing a bit of a further analysis on the latest update related to impacts related to budget, revenues, and that piece. And so we're just finalizing those details. And now that we have a restart plan in place and starting to roll forward, we're going to have those better details relating to that. So that's scheduled to come at the next council meeting as well. So we've got a lot of stuff that will be rolled out at the next council meeting. And we all, from some news and more on the ground activities, I know that the Recreation Collaboration Group, they've been working on the reopening of things such as the playgrounds, the spray park. And so I know they had a meeting today and they're working through the details of that. And they're doing that in conjunction with the school district as the school district opens up. So I believe that they're looking towards a June 1st start date. of reopening. So we're not far off that. They're just having to put together some details relating to that. We did receive some recommendations and direction from Island Health about what that might look like. So that's been very helpful in how we can reopen those facilities that are currently closed. And so the next phase, what we would be looking at is down the road here is to be looking at the reopening of things such as the community center and the offices, but we are a little ways off that. We need to get through this first phase of getting our safety plan in place for our administration side of things and our public works. And then we'll be looking at that next phase. So we'll be able to report back on an update on dates and timelines on that at the next council meeting. The last area I was just going to mention was, I know that we're in the final steps of actually putting together how we can safely receive tax payments. And so we've got some plans in place. And this is a bit of a good start for us to try, put some procedures in place and make sure that we can do this before we start opening up other parts of the operation. So that there is a schedule right now that we're looking at. I believe it's June 1st as well, or June 2nd, I believe, that we would be opening up the gymnasium and people can come through and make payments within the community center there, the recreation center. We have some limited hours and we're just starting to put together those details of what that might look like. But we're confident that at the end of the day, if people wanted to come in, they can either make an appointment or they can come in during those hours that we're open. And this is another piece that we're working in collaboration with the region as well. I know the other municipalities are also looking at having a similar setup, and we're going to hopefully put some advertising out for the region on what those available times are for people to come in and make those payments. I think that's all I have. One other thing, I don't have the number here, but I did want to mention the latest update on this is, as an example, I don't think council, we've reported back on council, but our utilities payment that council had given direction about deferring, we've actually had a very strong uptake, and I believe it was maybe our chief financial officer be able to give an update further on this, but we were up in the 40%. This was last week that we'd already received payments for. So actually it's a lot higher than we expected it to be. So those paying online or dropping checks off, we were tracking very well for that, especially since it wasn't due, still wasn't even due for the regular term. And as you know, council extended that period of payment. So that's actually a really good sign that people have recognized the ability for that online payment and paying it on time as well. So a success in the communication, and we'll continue to provide that update on what that looks like. So if there's any questions, happy to answer those.
Anyone have any questions? No? Okay. So there's no, thank you very much, Clayton.
Yeah.
Very good report. We have no consent calendar, no new business, no notice, motions, and announcements. So we go into question period. So please send your questions by email to info@cumberland.ca using subject line question period. And those questions would be read out to us by our corporate officer. So
we've got one from a representative from the Cumberland Business Collective, asking if they should choose someone to connect with you and who should they reach out to about the regional economic development.
Okay, well, I'm really glad they're being proactive because they were certainly on my list to reach out to. So if they could leave their name and phone number to contact them.
Okay.
Okay.
And then in regards to the Village Hall, from a Village Hall fan, asking if we could consider a Zoom meeting invite if an outdoor meeting is not an option.
Okay. Absolutely, we will look at all options. They seem to be coming in quicker now.
No, we've got solicitation for door hardware. More questions. Oh, there's one more. Oh, yes, the Village Hall fan says yes, please.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you very
That's
much,
it.
everybody. So we have a closed portion. So would somebody like to read the motion?
I'll move that council close the meeting to the public pursuant to section 90 of the community charter to consider labor relations or other employee relations.
Seconder, Councillor Sproul, all in favor? Carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for those people watching us.
Thank you.
Are we
Okay.
taking 5?